The porch swing creaked softly in the summer breeze, its chains gently squealing as it swayed back and forth. Eleanor Matthews sat with her youngest daughter tucked beside her, a lemonade in her hand and the last golden threads of sunset warming the front yard. Her husband, David, reclined nearby in a rocking chair, silently taking in the view of Willow Bend, a peaceful, idyllic neighborhood with manicured lawns, polite waves, and HOA rules posted like scripture in the community bulletin board. But peace is a fragile thing in places like Willow Bend, and some people thrive not on harmony, but on control. Enter Karen Whitmore. She first appeared 2 weeks after the Matthews family moved into their classic white and blue colonial on Elmwood Lane. Short-haired, perennially frowning, and always armed with a clipboard, Karen seemed to sniff out anything that did not conform to the sacred bylaws of the Homeowners Association. And the moment she spotted the old wooden swing hanging from the Matthews front porch beam, polished, painted, and hung with care, her eyes lit up like a predator locking on to prey. The notice came the next morning, crisp and aggressive, rolled into the family's mailbox like a tiny grenade. Violation Notice 001, Unauthorized Permanent Outdoor Structure. Fine, $150. Eleanor frowned as she read it, her lips pressed into a confused line. "This has to be a mistake," she said aloud, waving the notice toward David. "It's a swing, not a gazebo." David's eyes narrowed as he read the document. The name Karen Whitmore was typed at the bottom, beneath the HOA seal. "Karen Whitmore, head of the HOA Enforcement Committee," he murmured, as if recalling a memory that left a bad taste. "You know her?" He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the paper a little longer, his thumb brushing the edge with quiet deliberation. "Not personally, but I remember her name." Eleanor sighed. "We'll go to the next HOA meeting. It's probably just a misunderstanding." But it wasn't. By the time the next meeting came around, they had received 3 more notices, one for the unapproved porch swing, one for an unregistered decorative flower box on the windowsill, and one, outrageously, for excessive visual contrast in mailbox color. Each fine grew larger, each letter more aggressive. The final one was marked "Final Warning" and included a threat of legal action if the swing wasn't removed in 10 days. At the meeting, held in the community center with its smell of carpet cleaner and passive aggression, Karen presided at the front like a self-crowned monarch. She wore a pearl brooch, set ramrod straight, and smiled with the smugness of someone who believed the universe revolved on the axis of her opinion. David and Eleanor sat in the back until the agenda reached code violations. Karen stood. "The next item concerns multiple violations on Elmwood Lane, specifically Lot 14. That porch swing, though quaint, was not submitted for approval and violates Section 7C of the HOA Code." Eleanor raised her hand politely. "Excuse me, we were under the impression—" "You'll have a chance to comment," Karen snapped. David's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Karen continued, "We must preserve the integrity of Willow Bend's aesthetic. Unauthorized modifications cannot be tolerated. Therefore, unless the swing is removed by Friday, legal proceedings will commence." "Are you serious?" Eleanor blurted. "It's a swing. People have swings on their porches." "Not this porch, not that swing," Karen replied, her tone laced with venom.
David finally rose to his feet. The room fell quiet. There was something about the way he stood, calm but solid, that drew attention. "May I speak?" he asked. Karen gave him a condescending smile. "Of course, sir. Briefly." David stepped forward. "We chose this neighborhood because we believed in its sense of community, not just its rules. I helped build places like this, literally and legally. I've chaired HOAs before. I respect order, but I also respect common sense." Karen's smile twitched. David looked at her directly. "You're misapplying the code. That swing is not a permanent structure. It's attached using standard hooks, easily removable." Karen interrupted. "Section 7C. "I wrote Section 7C, David said. The room shifted. People murmured. Karen blinked. "What?" "I was one of the original drafters of the Willow Bend HOA charter, 20 years ago. My name is on the founding documents. I helped write the very rules you're misquoting." Karen's face froze, but she recovered quickly. "Be that as it may, the board has the authority." "Not in this case. There's a clause in the charter. Paragraph 4, Article 9. It gives original founding members of the HOA the right to challenge and override any enforcement action that deviates from the intended spirit of the code, especially if it targets aesthetics over structural integrity." He reached into his folder and pulled out a weathered document, protected in plastic. He unfolded it carefully and held it up. "Signed by the first HOA president, myself, and 3 others." Karen's face drained of color. "Effective immediately, I am invoking that clause. Furthermore, I'm submitting a formal complaint against you, Ms. Whitmore, for misuse of authority and targeting residents without proper review." The room burst into quiet gasps. Someone in the second row whispered, "She's been doing that to everyone." Karen turned red. "You can't. This is outrageous. This is a setup." David calmly placed the document on the table. "You've forgotten what the HOA was built for, Ms. Whitmore. It was never meant to be your personal fiefdom." Karen sputtered, but no one came to her defense. By the end of the meeting, the fines were suspended, the enforcement actions put on hold, and a special hearing scheduled to review Karen's position. But David wasn't finished. Not yet. For a few days after the meeting, Willow Bend felt different. Neighbors who once glanced cautiously at the Matthews family now smiled when they passed. Cars honked in solidarity. One resident even tied a yellow ribbon to their own porch swing, as if it were some quiet symbol of resistance. But the storm hadn't passed. Not yet. Karen Whitmore might have been wounded, but she was not a woman who gave up easily. For her, power wasn't just about enforcement, it was about identity. And to have that power challenged, especially so publicly, was an insult she could not let stand. 3 days after the hearing, a new letter arrived. Certified mail. It was hand-delivered by a stone-faced courier and signed in Karen's precise handwriting. Notice of escalation. Formal motion to remove override privileges of original founding members of the HOA due to age of document and obsolescence of clauses. David read it in silence, his fingers drumming slowly against the kitchen table. Eleanor stood behind him, her arms crossed. "She's trying to invalidate the entire charter? Can she even do that?" He exhaled, calmly folding the letter. "Only with a 2/3 vote from the board and a supermajority from the community." "She's betting people won't care enough to vote." "Exactly."
That night, David went up to the attic. The girls were asleep, Eleanor was brewing tea, and the house was still. From an old chest marked HOA Founding Docs, he pulled out a leather binder, dusty but intact. Inside were photos, hand-signed minutes, original blueprints of the community layout, and a stack of letters written by the very first board members, neighbors, friends, architects, engineers, people who believed in building something fair. And at the top, stapled neatly, was a mission statement, handwritten by David himself. "The Willow Bend HOA shall exist not to control, but to protect, not to micromanage, but to maintain dignity, Not to rule, but to serve. He smiled faintly, the weight of those words settling on his shoulders. Karen's next move was swift and calculated. She began knocking on doors, clipboard in hand, peddling fear. "He's trying to roll things back to the Stone Age," she warned one resident. "If we let him override the board, what's next? Lawn flamingos? Junk cars on driveways?" Some people nodded nervously, others shut the door in her face. But Karen had allies, those who'd benefited from her iron rule. The real estate agent who flipped 5 homes under her strict codes. The contractor who got exclusive rights to approved fencing. The HOA treasurer who quietly pocketed inflated landscaping fees. They rallied behind her, whispering that David's return meant chaos. An old man living in the past, a founder too sentimental to see how order kept property values high. David, meanwhile, didn't knock on doors. He hosted an open barbecue. On a sunny Saturday, families gathered on the Matthews lawn. No speeches, just grilled burgers, cold drinks, laughter, and a small printout of the HOA's mission on each table. People read. They asked questions. And they started talking to one another, many for the first time in years. "Did she find you for your mailbox, too?" "Mine was a hummingbird feeder, said it attracted pests." "I got a warning for my kid's sidewalk chalk." By sunset, something had shifted. Where once there was fear, there was frustration, a shared understanding. Karen's rule hadn't just kept the lawns clean, it had crushed the spirit of the neighborhood. When the vote came, the meeting hall was packed. Karen stood at the front with her arms folded tightly, flanked by 2 board members with clipped expressions. David entered late, wearing a navy blazer, the original HOA binder, under his arm. "Item 1, Karen began. "Motion to revise and nullify Charter Clause 9-4A, Founder Override Authority, on grounds of obsolescence and conflicting governance." Before she could continue, David raised his hand. "Point of order." Karen rolled her eyes. "You are not a board member, Mr. Matthews. I am invoking my right as a charter founder to present relevant historical documentation before any vote that modifies the core charter." Gasps. Karen clenched her jaw. "Granted," she hissed. David stepped forward. He opened the binder with care, laying out the original documents like a museum exhibit. "Let me remind everyone here why this HOA exists. We wrote these codes not to suppress, but to protect. The very override clause Karen wants to eliminate was added after our first president tried to ban Christmas lights. We realized the need for a check, an emergency brake against tyranny disguised as order." He looked at the room. "It's not obsolete. It's a safeguard." Karen stood, face flushed. "This is dramatic theater. You want loopholes to bend the rules for yourself. That swing was not approved. You are using an old man's signature to cling to exceptions." "No," David said calmly. "I am using my signature to remind this neighborhood that power without wisdom is dangerous." Murmurs filled the room. People nodded. Karen knew she was losing control. She made her last move. "I demand a vote, here and now."